Hey everyone, hi. Welcome back to my channel. It's been a minute for me. I have Harry in the room, so maybe you'll get a cameo from him. If you don't know who Harry is, he is my wonderful and adorable mini schnauzer, and you'll definitely get to see him eventually throughout this video. So this video is going to be 10 books I want to read before I die. Now, last year I did a video. It was a tag that actually went around. It was to promote a podcast, and the tag was called the Mooks and Grapes Bucket List Book Tag. I'm gonna leave that video linked down below. And what the whole premise of it was to choose 10 books that you wanted to read before you died, and then the commenters could vote on what books you pick up next, or what books you should highly prioritize and read in the next year or so. So what happened with me is that I did that video, and then the comments came in as they do, and they were wonderful, and I got immediately overwhelmed. And then I made this sort of sweeping promise that I was going to prioritize all of the books that I had chosen to read before I died because I suddenly felt the urgency of my life, that I was going to be here for just but a moment, that I will blink and my life will be over, and I was just feeling like I wanted to get to all of the books. I'm going to give you an update of last year's list at the second part of the video. And the first part of this video is actually going to be me talking about the new 10 books I want to read before I die. Let's just get started. Since I'm going to be sharing the books that I want to read before I die, then I would love for you to share as well. Please share with me in the comments, or if you make videos, then please take this idea and run with it. I highly encourage you to do it. And I would love to know your methodology, why did you choose the books that you chose, and your list. So here is my methodology. I literally chose books that tugged at my heartstrings. I was like, oh, if I had time, if I wasn't reading anything else right now, if I didn't have any plans with anyone else, I would pick this up next. I want to read this. I have this desire to read the book. And yeah, that was really my premise for these books. And it was the stronger the desire, the more likely it was going to be in this pile. So these are the books that I have in my mind, the books I want to read right now. And that's really the parameters of my own list. And interestingly, it's going to be a very weird comparison to last year's list, because last year I chose a lot of classics, and this year this stack is not a lot of classics. It's actually kind of the opposite. Anyways, okay, so we're going to start. The first book I want to read before I die is Sarah Waters' Fingersmith. Now, I am choosing this because I have heard so many good things about Sarah Waters. I heard she's brilliant. She writes in a Victorian-esque style, although she is a living author, and I have just heard brilliant things about her work. And there are a lot of people that I love and trust here on this booktube here in this booktube community, and they love her too. And so I'm I really want to read Sarah Waters. And of the two books that I've excuse me, y'all. Of the two books that I own by her, I think Fingersmith is her more brilliant work. I also own The Paying Guests. And yeah, and so I wanted to get to her most brilliant. I'm one of those people that I don't read everything from an author. I tend to just skim off the top. I'm what is their best work? I'll just start there, and if I like it, I'll just work backwards. And so that's what I'm doing here. I'm I think Sarah Waters is her best work, according to some people. And I was I'll start here and I'll work backwards. I'll get to The Paying Guests afterwards. But yeah, she's high priority. She's on my mind. The next two books, I really don't care which one I read. So they're going to be lumped together as one. Either one is fine with me. And it's because I just love this poet. I read her and I felt I just immediately connected with what she was doing. And I don't know, there was just something about her poetry that made me want to read more. And I've read more since. And so I bought two more books of Sharon Olds poetry. I have The Father and The Living and the Dead. I don't care which one I read. I want to read more Sharon Olds. I want all of the Sharon Olds in my life. I think her work is brilliant, and she's one of those authors that I genuinely enjoy spending time with her. And so I'm I don't really care which one I read. I just want to read both, everything Sharon Olds ever wrote, all of, everything. The next book I saw on BookTube, actually there was a read-along, a reading group reading this book. It's an ancient book. It is old, y'all. And I just really wanted to read it back then. It like piqued my interest, and then it hasn't left my interest since. I picked it up recently, and it is actually Herodotus's The Histories. The Histories by Herodotus. And this is a nonfiction book. It's very much, from what I know about it, it's very like gossipy, because the ancients were, instead of like sitting there and trying to write down every detail and be historically accurate, it's a lot of gossip. It's a lot of, people just kind of sharing their stories. And that's what I know that this is about. And basically everyone that read it in that group that reviewed it here on BookTube has just said it was a lovely and wonderful experience. And so as I looked around and I was like, what books are calling to me? Like Herodotus is calling to me. And so here's the Histories. Harry's getting quite wily, so he's off of my lap, y'all. I can't do it anymore. Okay, this next author I have fallen head over heels in love with. I have loved both of the books that I read of hers this month, and I just think that she is a brilliant author. And of the books that she is known for, this is like the last best book of hers, like the last best known book of hers that I know of. I mean, she's got a large catalog, and I'm just gonna cut to the chase, Shelley. Cut to the chase. That is Edith Wharton's Ethan Frome. I keep on saying I'm going to read this. Every time I mention I'm going to read this, everybody's like, it's so good, it's so brilliant. Unless you're Hannah from Hannah's Books, and she did not like this when she read it as a youth. But I just like I want to read it, y'all. I want to read it, okay? And it's there. It's calling to me, and I'm like, look, I just need a little bit more of Edith Wharton before I die, and here it is. Actually, following that theme of like everybody says I will love this, the next two books are very much in that vein, and that those are, well, I'll start with one. A Month in the Country by J.L. Carr. I've heard that the prose work and the humor in this book is phenomenal, like mind-blowing, like so good. And I don't, it's a slim little work, and I keep thinking about it. I keep on wanting to pick it up, and yet I just snub it. I don't know why. There's gonna be a lot of that. I'm like, I don't know why I haven't picked it up yet, but yet this is one of the books I want to read before I die. I don't want to die without reading the beautiful prose work of J.L. Carr. Similarly, Nella Larsen's Passing, just another one of those books that I feel like everyone and their mother has read, and not me. Like, they even have a Netflix television show on it. This is the Netflix cover. Like, I know the premise, and I've heard that it's a brilliant work. Again, another slim work. And I'm like, I just need to get to it. Like, what is my problem? The next book, I know why I haven't gotten to, and it is because of the sheer length of the book. This is a brick of a book, and I'm just intimidated by it. I'm really intimidated by it. I really ought to do like a read-along or a reading group for this book so that we can support each other through this massive read, and that is Duck's Newburyport by Lucy Allman. Now, this is the longest book on this list of books I want to read before I die. It's just huge. It's huge. I don't want to listen to it. Like, I don't want to like do like the audiobook and the book. I want to do like the actual book because it's stream of consciousness, and in stream of consciousness writing, it is the only kind of writing that actually, when something surprising happens, it like takes my breath away. It happened with Marcel Proust in Search of Lost Time, Swan's Way. I read part of Swan's Way. I don't want to give you the impression that I read the whole thing. That's actually going to come up here in just a moment. With Mrs. Dalloway, the same thing. It's like you're looking at one thing and you're in the mind of this character and you're in their stream of consciousness and you're actually like living and being that character. And then when that character is shocked, like you're also, as the reader, at least I also as the reader was like, oh my gosh, wow, like just took my breath away. And I know that for people who have read this, it does a similar thing. It's like you're going along and then something happens, and the way that Bob the Booker talked about it, he said it felt like the floor was being ripped out from under him. I think it was something like that. Not the carpet. It was like the floor fell apart. I don't know what he was saying. Sorry, Bob. But anyways, I've just heard that there is just like a shocking moment, and I want to be reading it. I don't want to be like listening or any, So anyway, so I need the time to actually do it. Maybe March of the Mammoth for next year? I'm not sure. All right, I'm down to my last three, one of which is a book that I just keep on hearing about because it sparked the dark academia movement, like the modern dark academia darkness that's out there. The books that are dark academia was inspired by this particular book. It's like the root of that movement. And that is The Secret History by Donna Tartt. I didn't realize that it had sort of sparked that whole, hoity-toity movement, but I have since learned that it all started with Donna Tartt, and I was like, well, I want to know what Donna Tartt is all about. I want to know what this movement is all about, and I'm very much somebody who likes to start at like the beginning of it all, and so I want to start here. I want to see if like dark academia is for me. So yeah, Donna Tartt's A Secret History. I've yet to meet Donna Tartt on the page, and it's getting kind of embarrassing at this point, 2 more books, they're nonfiction books, and that I just feel like they are for me. Like, I will love these books. And I feel like I'm waiting for the right time, and this is the kind of video where I'm like, Shelly, just get it together. There's never going to be the right time. When you pick it up, that is the right time, okay? And the first one is actually Prairie Fires, which is the biography of Laura Ingalls Wilder. You would think I know. I'm not like the biggest fan of Little House on the Prairie. I watched the show when I was younger, but I didn't grow up on the books at all. The reason why this is on the list is because I've heard that this is very American. This is very like kind of dismantling the American dream. And there's just something about it that has been calling to me since I heard about it. And I listened to the call, and then I'm like, shh, no, not right now. This is about 500 pages. I don't know if I'll actually get to this in Nonfiction November, because I kind of have this, I have this energy that I want to finish as many nonfiction books as possible, which means that I'm going to be focusing on shorter reads. And so I might wait on this, but who knows, maybe like January or February of next year, I will finally pick this up. And then my final one will be, is actually Svetlana Alexievich's The Unwomanly Face of War, which I actually might pick up for Nonfiction November. I've heard just so many people say how incredible Alexievich's, I keep wanting Svetlana's, Alexievich's writing is, and like just how wonderful and evocative it is, like, or provocative it is, whichever one, that her writing really sticks with you. And there's just something about this book that I really do want to get to. It's a slimmer work. It's not like the 500 page. It's not even, I don't know, why is 500 pages intimidating to me right now? I don't know. Yeah, so this is not 500 pages. This is much shorter than 500 pages. And so I actually might read this for Nonfiction November. I just feel like this is going to be the book for me, that I will love it, that I will get a lot from it. And when I have that feeling, it makes me want to pick it up, but for whatever reason, I just haven't. I will say, like I said with last year's list, that these books I really do want to pick them up before the end of 2023, so before the end of next year, and maybe I'll do a video next year about what I picked up, what I didn't, what I thought about the books, and so on and so forth. So that was my list of 11 books, but really, share and olds, it doesn't matter to me which one I picked up. But the thing is that I'm going to make the same sort of grand gesture as I did for last year's books, is that I want to pick all of these up. I want to read all of these before the end of next year, before the end of 2023. And yeah, we'll see how I do, and if my feelings change about these books, because this is very much like a feelings-based video for me. Maybe your methodology will be a little more succinct, a little more logical. Mine is just like, I just want to read these because they sound good and I feel like they might change my life. So yeah. Okay, so now I'm going to go through all of the books that I talked about last year that I wanted to read before I died. And I'll go through the ones that I read first, and then I'll go through the ones that I have just lost interest in for one reason or another and haven't gotten to. So let's just get into that. Okay, so starting with all the books that I read, so the first one was Diana Gabaldon's Outlander. Now, this is a very, very spicy historical fiction that has a lot of romantic scenes. It's not call it what it is, Shelley. It was really good. It was good at what it was doing. It was, satisfying in a lot of ways. However, I'm realizing that I'm not, even though I'm a hopeless romantic at heart, I don't love reading spicy scenes as much as I thought I would. And so I've actually, like, I kind of feel kind of meh about continuing with this series. Maybe one day. But yeah, I was really glad that I read it. At the time, I thought I was the last person on earth to have read Diana Gabaldon's Outlander. And now I'm glad that I've read it and I have an opinion on it. I kind of did the Sharon Olds thing with, like, I just want to read this author. I never read her, but any of these two books is great with me. And I actually read both of them. And that is Edith Wharton, and we have The House of Mirth and The Age of Innocence. I read The Age of Innocence this past month with my friend Sandy at Miss Reads a Lot. I will leave her channel link down below, along with everybody I've mentioned. That should go without saying at this point. And I love them both. They were incredible. These were incredible reads. I would say if you have not read Edith Wharton, either one of these books, you just try. And I promise you it will be very eye-opening. I don't know. It was just an incredible experience. And I'm just so glad that I read these before I kicked the bucket. Another book that was on the list from last year that actually made it to one of my favorites. I mean, it's still a book that I think about today. And that was Catherine the Great by Robert K. Massey. I picked this up on a whim, and at the time of making that video, it was really calling to me. And so I read it at the end of November and December of last year, and I loved it. It was amazing. Massey is an incredible biographer. He's got a lot of personality. He's got a lot of skill, and he definitely shows that skill as he's writing Catherine the Great. He's got a whole series on the Romanovs, and just an incredible introduction for me to Russian literature, to Russian history. Through this book, I actually bought another one of his books, and I plan on reading it, you know, eventually. It hasn't made the list. It's not calling to me like this one was, but just a fantastic read. The final book that was on the list that I read was The Odyssey by Homer. I read this with a book club that I was running at the beginning of the year, and it was really good. It's a foundational piece of literature, very episodic, very much like going through the hero's journey in some ways. Mostly I would say it's more episodic than anything else, and a lot of literature has borrowed, begged, and stolen from the Odyssey. But the book that actually kind of shocked me and ended up being a favorite, the one that actually sticks with me more, is The Iliad by Homer. I like that one better. I just like the structure of it more. And the Odyssey was great, and I'm really glad I read it. These next two books, I've actually lost my interest in them. I've lost my taste in them. I actually had the opportunity to pick up this one right here. I'll actually show you it. And it's Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind. Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind. I was right. By Hayao Miyazaki. It's a graphic novel. It's done in these 2 volumes. Here is one of the volumes, and it's gorgeous. I mean, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful box set. This is actually my husband's box set, or our box set. We own it together jointly, and neither of us have read it. But the thing is that somebody had offered to do a buddy read with me of it. At the time, you know, actually being confronted with, like, do you want to actually pick this up right now? And the answer was no. And that feeling has continued to stick with me with this book. It doesn't call to me. I don't really want to pick it up. There's nothing about it that I'm like, I want to read it. And I think part of it is that nobody's out there saying, this is the best graphic novel I've ever read. It's so worth it. And, you know, I'm very susceptible to hype. That's kind of weird to admit. I'm very susceptible to, like, when somebody else is like, oh, it was amazing. I loved it. It was so great. Like, that makes me want to pick it up too, you know? And I'm just not hearing anything about it. And the things that I have heard about it are like, you know, it was good. You know, it was good. And I'm like, you know, okay, that's swell, you know, that kind of thing. So yeah, so here it is. Unfortunately, I just don't really have much of an interest in reading it. At least it's not on that high priority list of the books I want to read before I die. The next book that I've unfortunately lost quite a bit of interest in reading is The Ship of Thisus, and this is by J.J. Abrams and Doug Dorst, and it is a really fascinating book. So here's the cover. It's sold in this, like, single bind up, and the book is like a little puzzle in and of itself. And so you have the main text, The Ship of Thisus, I think I'm saying that right, and then you have everybody's notes. This is intentional. So there's like a story within a story within a story kind of thing, and people talking to each other through the notes that they left to one another, and underlining and little inserts. And at the time, it sounded just so cool, like a really cool adventure. And in a lot of ways, it still does. But I've heard it takes a long time to get through because of how it's written. And again, if there was like a group out there that was like hyping it up and saying it was so great and it's such a great experience, but I've actually heard the opposite. I've heard a lot of people say, oh, I tried that and I couldn't get through it. Oh, I tried that, last year and I DNF'd it. Or I've tried that 5 times and I've DNF'd it every single time. And so, when I hear that, I'm like, unfortunately I'm susceptible to the comments of my own videos. Maybe that's not, unfortunate. Maybe it's a good thing. Maybe y'all are steering me in the right direction. Oh no, now I have, here's the seal that dropped out. And so, yeah, so I feel like it's a bit of a precious read. I have 2 children that are pretty young. They are 4 and 6, and I just don't want to like sit there and have all of these maybe papers out of the book or like all of these different layers and then be like, oh, I can't touch it. I don't want anyone to mess it up. Don't I don't want to be upset about the reading experience or being distracted. And I don't know, I just feel like there's not a lot about this book that's calling to me anymore. Another book that I've generally kind of lost a bit of interest in is Flannery O'Connor and her short stories. This is her complete short stories. I've read a good bit from here. This is actually on my 22 classics for 2022 and I have yet to pick it up. And I think it's that. I think I'm just not somebody who's drawn to short stories in the least. They're just not really my bag. It's not that I dislike them. I just don't really want to sit down with a short story. Nothing about it really calls to me. I've read, I think, 1 short story collection this year. It was fine. It was Elizabeth Strout's Everything is Possible. And again, it was fine. I feel bad saying it, but I just, since making the video of the books I want to read before I died, I was getting a lot of feedback from friends and other people that I should read this. It's Southern Gothic. It's so amazing. And it's like, I know what Flannery O'Connor is doing. I understand her style and the way her stories unfold. It's got a very specific style to them. And so there's not a lot calling me back to them. But now I do think that there are a couple of short stories that I want to read before I kick the bucket, before I die, if we're using that hyperbole still. There are some short stories, a select few, that I still want to get to because I feel like they're foundational and very famous and referenced quite a bit. But in terms of like her whole body of work, I'm just not interested in it anymore. This next book, I feel like I just swapped out my interest in her books. It is The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt. So I have a Donna Tartt on my books I want to read before I die for 2022. I much rather would want to read The Secret History if I were to start with her. It's not that I don't want to read this, it's just that of the books that I own of hers, I want to read The Secret History. And so this book gets kind of shoved to the back of the shelf and I'm like, oh yeah, I'll get to you one day. These last 2 books, I do feel like I will cycle back around with my interest, but I feel like at the time that I made the video last year, I was very much like thinking about these books and I wanted to read them. And in my journey, the burning desire to read these books has just waned quite a bit. But I think, I think I'm very susceptible to like that, getting that hype up again, just not at this moment. And that is, Swan's Way, but the first book of In Search of Lost Time by Marcel Proust. I don't know, like I've read parts of this. I know what this book is about. I understand this style. My husband read the whole series and loved them. We actually own several copies of In Search of Lost Time, and I liked it. But since then, I've read other styles of stream of consciousness, writing, Virginia Woolf, and I have a better idea of that style and why, that feeling of reading it and just having to really invest yourself into getting into the mindset of the character. And I know also just how difficult that is. Like, it's not an easy read. So actually, I kind of, now that I'm talking about it, I'm sort of hyping it up to myself. Oh, what a strange turn of events. Like, I feel like I'd actually have an easier time reading it now with me as a reader now, because I've learned to not have to like stop at every detail. I used to be one of those readers that like, if I didn't know a word, I would have to look it up right then and there. If I didn't understand a reference, I would have to go to the footnote. Like, I was a very almost tedious reader. And then when you're in this, if you don't know anything about Swan's Way, you are in the upper crust of society in France my camera shut off. So, you know, right in the middle of the sentence, how rude. Anyways, you were in the upper crust of society during the late 1800s, I believe. And Marcel Proust is one of those people, one of those writers who often references art, and there's so many characters. It's a lot, y'all. And so at the time when I was reading this, it was just a little more than I could handle as a reader. Now since then, I've learned to like let the details go a little bit. I don't have to always have to cling so tightly to every single character and have to like track down who they are and the first thing they were introduced in so that I know exactly who they are, because a lot of times the writer will allude to who they are and their importance in the story, especially if they were introduced at like the beginning of the story and then don't pop up until near the end. And you know, like I've learned to trust the authors more, especially if they know what they're doing. And I believe that Marcel Proust is someone who knows what he's doing. And so I think I would actually have an easier time of reading it now. I just, I just need the right buddy reader. This is not a call to buddy read this with me, but it's one of those things that I'm like, if I saw a group on YouTube and it was the right time and everybody was like diving into this book and, you know, like everyone was really hyped about it, I feel like I would be like, yeah, I'll do that. Or if like my husband was like, do you want to read this with me? I would be like, yeah, let's do it. Like I would definitely try this first volume of the massive book that is In Search of Lost Time. But until then, I'm sort of feeling like, one day. And then the last book I do want to read, I have started it. It is actually one of my dear friends. It is her favorite book of all time. And I think part of it is the length that sort of like gets me. And then part of it is like the subject matter, because it is about whaling, the whaling community, which probably just gave it away. And it's about the sort of minutia of the whaling community. And that is Moby Dick by Herman Melville. And there is a part of me that does still want to read this. I heard the prose work is incredible. I heard it's a very satisfying read for a lot of readers, and it feels like it is a Shelley book. But when I think about picking it up, my soul goes dead inside. And I don't know. There's nothing calling me to it. I'm not like, yes, my life will be so enriched if I read you. And I think it also doesn't help that I started it at one point and then stopped. And it wasn't like an actual DNF. Like I'm firmly putting this away and I don't want to read you because you made me angry or something. No, it's not that. It's just more like, maybe. And again, it sort of goes with the same thing that I said about Marcel Proust. It's like, if the right reader was really excited about it and they were like, I want to read it with you, Shelley, and I would be like, like my husband or something, then I would be like, okay. But until then, actually, we did try and read it together and we both stopped reading it. Oh my gosh, we're hopeless. We're hopeless. But anyway, so it's just one of those books that I feel like does call to me from time to time, but I'm in that cycle where I'm like, no thanks. And then I feel like I'll probably cycle back around and be like, okay, yes, I want to read you. So yeah, so that's it. So those are all of the books that I want to read before I die, the 10 new ones, which are, the difference is like, it's the new books, the new list is so much more to like who I am as a reader now. It's made up of mostly female authors, which I mostly read female authors. It's just how it shakes out. I tend to like that voice and what they're saying, and I can relate to it a little bit differently. And I like to support female authors, consciously support female authors. Also is a lot more like selective in terms of like who I'm picking. Like, for example, I'm picking Sharon Olds, who I know is a poet that I already love. And so I'm picking something that like I feel very drawn to, somebody that I feel quite drawn to. And then also, like, if we're talking mammoth to mammoth, like I'm going from a mammoth like this that is older and about a topic that I'm not necessarily interested in, to, let me see if I can move it, to a mammoth like this that I feel like I would actually quite relate to, because I heard the narrator is a bit neurotic and anxiety ridden, which, I can tend to be from time to time. So I feel like the new list is actually much more tailored to who I am as a reader today. Whereas the old list, I felt like there was a lot of shoulding on me. Like I was shoulding myself that I should read these things. And I'm so glad that I did. Oh, see, y'all have a visitor. Things are getting great. Just give me a moment. As I was saying, I feel like last year's list, there was a lot of should reads. Even when it came down to like the Odyssey and Marcel Proust, I felt like there was a lot of books that I ought to read because I am a reader. In this year's list, I'm like, you know, I want to read these, not because someone says I should, not because I feel like I'm obliged to because I am a reader, but because I truly want to. And then it's interesting because there are just reads that I've just lost interest in from last year. I thought I wanted to read them. They called to me at the time, but my taste has changed. And again, I feel like with any of these books, I could cycle back around and be like, yeah, I want to read that now. So it's interesting to see, like, from year to year how your relationship with your books evolve, and how, you know, something that might have seemed so exciting at the time is not so exciting nowadays. So all of that is really interesting, and I really thought this would be a great touchstone just for me as a reader and as somebody who's interested in how we evolve as readers, to look back on and to talk about. So anyhow, I'm sure this was a doozy. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for being here. Tell me about the books that you wanted to read or you want to read before you die. And tell me if the evolution of yourself as a reader. That would be really interesting. Anyways, if you've made it to the end, I would encourage you to subscribe, stick around. I do this kind of thing from time to time, talk at length about books that I love and want to read. And yeah, that's it for me. So thank you just so much for watching. Thank you for spending this time with me. I'm just ever so grateful that you have, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye guys.